My name's David Cutter. I own a small farm in Boundary County, northern Idaho. I was born and raised on that property. Grew up with pine sap on my boots and the sound of cows waking me up before school. But I couldn't wait to leave. Graduated from high school with the dumb idea to move to Seattle and make it big. Corner office and all. The day school finished was the day I got in my truck and headed off. However, the city chewed me up. Couldn't afford college. I worked warehouse jobs, went through a short marriage, and blew out my knee while lifting a crate that was meant to be handled by a forklift. Ended up sleeping on a buddy's floor until I couldn't take the pity anymore. When I finally came back in October last year, I was 32, limping, broke, divorced, and angry at the whole damn world. Just enough left in my savings to buy diesel and fencing staples. My father died 3 years before, my mother not long after, and for a while the property was leased out to a neighbor who needed the pasture. He went bust after 2 bad seasons and left the place in worse shape than he found it. Fences broken, the barn roof leaking, animals underfed. When the lease collapsed, there wasn't much left but a legal mess. I was awarded the remaining livestock as partial compensation. That's how I found myself back on the land I thought I'd left behind for good, inheriting a problem I couldn't afford to ignore. The house, an aging 2-story structure built by my grandfather's hands, still stood. The red paint peeled like sunburnt skin. The porch groaned every time I crossed it. Sometimes I wondered if the place sighed when I walked through the door. The well still worked, at least. It was livable. Barely. The land was better than the house. 87 acres, most of it pasture, bordered by dense fir and pine. The Kaniksu National Forest begins just past the fence line. Hundreds of square miles of wild timber crawling up into the Selkirks. I never liked those woods, even as a kid. They were too dense, too dark, like they were hiding something dangerous just beneath the canopy. I always felt watched when I got too close to the tree line. Folks said it was just my imagination. Too many horror movies. But I know now, some things out there don't care if you believe in them or not. They're real all the same. Anyway, I got the farm running again. Fewer cattle than before, about 2 dozen. Pigs, too. 18 sows and over 100 piglets. Chickens by the dozens. However, the real asset was a young Hereford bull the lessee had picked up just before his finances imploded. The bull was a high-dollar animal, selected for his bloodline and size. Top-tier breeding stock. The lessee had hoped the investment would save his struggling operation and possibly open up a new market for premium calves. Instead, it landed in my lap when the lease collapsed and he bailed. That bull was supposed to become the backbone of my little farm. If I could generate revenue from his sperm, I might actually have a shot at turning this place around, maybe even grow the herd. I didn't expect to get rich. A warm bed and food on the table were all I really cared about. I just wanted peace and quiet until I figured out what to do with my life. And for a little while, things were fine. October in Boundary County is a quiet season. The tourists are gone, the elk hunters haven't quite rolled in yet, and the land feels like it's holding its breath. The frost comes in slow and mean. Every morning, I'd wake to ice-laced grass and a low layer of mist curling in the fields. I'd make coffee on the propane burner, sit on the back steps in my coat, and watch the animals stir to life. Chickens pecking at the hoarfrost, pigs grunting in their pens, cows lowing across the pasture. I was actually making a small profit. Then things took a turn. One night, I don't remember the exact date, but it was the tail end of October, I woke up around 2 in the morning to a strange noise. My first thought was raccoons, maybe a coyote, but it didn't quite sound like a small animal going through a garbage can. Thudding, splintering wood, and then this high-pitched screech, like metal being torn. It snapped me awake like a rifle crack. I keep an old double-barreled shotgun next to the front door. It used to belong to my grandfather. Blued steel and walnut. Clean but ancient. To be honest, I had never fired it. It was more ornament than tool, something I kept around out of habit. But when I heard the noise, I grabbed it and slid in 2 shells of buckshot, the only ammo I had at the time. I shoved my feet into my boots, grabbed the flashlight, and stepped out into the cold. My flashlight beam cut across gravel and dried mud, catching glints of white and red. Then I saw it. Movement. Sudden and violent. A burst of feathers erupting at the edge of my flashlight beam like confetti from a shotgun blast. They spun and floated, catching the faint light as they drifted to the ground in slow, surreal spirals. I advanced, each step heavier than the last, as a feeling of unease began to grow inside me. I couldn't explain it, but my body sensed that something was wrong before my mind did. As I crossed the empty yard, the scene before me hit me like a punch to the gut. The chicken coop was a complete mess. One entire wall had been knocked inward with brute force. It looked like a car had rammed into it. Nails were bent backward. The chicken wire was tangled and torn. Something had ripped it acid. The ground was a churned mess of blood, feathers, and wood splinters. Not a single chicken was alive. I froze for a moment, shotgun trembling in my hands, palms slick with sweat despite the cold. Then I turned, slowly, sweeping the beam of the flashlight back across the yard behind me. The house stood silent, every window dark and watching. I checked the corners, by the propane tank, the shed, the rain barrels. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I half expected something to leap from the shadows, some shape crouched behind a corner, or hiding just beneath the porch. Then I swung the light toward the barn. It loomed large and skeletal in the dark, the roofline sagging just slightly in the middle. My finger itched against the trigger, the weight of the shotgun suddenly too heavy in my grip. I held my breath, trying to listen over the buzzing in my head. Nothing, not even the rustle of a field mouse, but it felt wrong, like the silence was hiding something, waiting just out of sight. A sharp crack echoed from my left, a branch snapping under weight. I jerked the flashlight in that direction, instinct faster than thought. The beam didn't quite make the tree line, which was about 50 yards from where I stood. I kept staring nonetheless. After a few seconds of hard squinting, I saw something move, just for a second, a silhouette shifting in front of the trees. At first I thought it was low to the ground, some kind of animal crouched near the underbrush. The beam from my flashlight wavered just short of the tree line, and the shadows played tricks on my eyes. Then the shape shifted. It didn't rise so much as unfurl, slowly lifting upward like something stretching after a long crawl. That's when I saw just how tall it really was. It stood fully upright, towering over the surrounding bushes and saplings. Too tall, too wide. I still couldn't make out details, just the outline, the bulk, the wrongness of it. It just stood there, unmoving, as if studying me. My flashlight quivered slightly in my grip, and the beam flickered across the forest floor, catching glimpses of its form, broad chest, long limbs, but no face, just darkness where a face should have been, until two yellow dots blinked into existence, reflections, like twin beads of glass catching the last strength of my fading flashlight. Not glowing, not like the old monster stories, just light bouncing off a smooth and still surface. Eyes, watching, locked on mine. The seconds dragged on. We just stood there, me in the open, the thing at the edge of the trees, in total silence. A standoff with no rules. I couldn't tell if it was trying to decide what I was or what it wanted to do next. My finger hovered near the trigger, but I didn't lift the shotgun. Some part of me knew it was too far for the buckshot to have any real effect, but another part hesitated for a different reason. The thing was standing upright. That simple fact confused my instincts. What if it were a person? A tall one, maybe wearing a coat, maybe hunched over for some reason I couldn't see. My mind scrambled for some kind of explanation that didn't involve monsters, trespasser or not. I couldn't just shoot someone, not unless they were coming at me. Some people would, sure, but I'm not wired that way. Still, something about the shape, how it stood, how it stared, jammed up my instinct to pull the trigger. That flicker of doubt was enough to confuse and paralyze me. In hindsight, maybe that moment of hesitation was my mistake. If I'd fired, if I'd hit it, hurt it, scared it off, it might have thought twice about coming back. It might have gone somewhere else, left the farm alone. But I didn't shoot it that night. I just stood there, trying to reason with a shape in the dark. After what felt like an eternity, it shifted, finally. The way it moved was smooth and deliberate, not the way a wild animal bolts when caught. It walked like it had no reason to run, like it knew I wouldn't do a damn thing to stop it. Arms hung low and loose at its sides, swaying slightly with each slow step. Its shoulders rolled with a calm, terrifying ease. It paused, turned slightly, as if looking right at me again, and then faded back into the trees. I lowered the shotgun a few inches and turned my attention back to the chicken coop, though I couldn't stop myself from glancing toward the tree line every few seconds. The way that thing had looked at me, it lingered in my head like a bad aftertaste. I scanned the damage again, trying to convince myself that a man could have done this, but it didn't track, not even if he had a sledgehammer. The chicken coop had been obliterated. The wall hadn't been kicked or pried apart. It had been shoved in from the outside with enough force to snap the studs and send boards flying. And the birds, some of them had been ripped nearly in half. One of them looked like it had exploded. I'd butchered animals before. I knew what normal looked like. This wasn't it. And why would a person do something like this? I mean, I know there's some weird shit out there, but this? This was a whole different level. My gut twisted. The longer I stood there, the worse the feeling got. I couldn't shake the sense that whatever I'd just seen wasn't finished, that it had only been testing the fence, so to speak, that something much worse was yet to come. The next morning, I drove into Bonner's Ferry. My hands were still trembling from the night before, and I hadn't slept more than an hour. I wasn't sure what I expected to find in town. Answers, maybe. Or just a few more shells for the shotgun. Something that might give me a fighting chance if that thing came back. The general store sat off the highway, near the rail tracks. Wooden siding, faded red awning, old antler mounts in the window. The place hadn't changed much since I was a teenager. The woman behind the counter hadn't either, though time had sharpened her more than softened her. "Well, well, if it isn't little Davy Cutter," she said, stepping out from behind the counter with a warmth in her voice that caught me off guard. Her eyes crinkled at the corners, that same knowing smile I remembered from when I was 8, and she'd sneak me extra cookies while babysitting. Her name was Janie McBride, 40-something now, still strawberry blonde, still sharp-eyed, and still standing like she owned every square foot of the place. Before I could say anything, she wrapped me in a firm hug that smelled like cedar soap and wood smoke. It hit me harder than I expected. Just how much I'd missed that kind of contact, that scent, that warmth, the way her arms didn't flinch or hesitate. For a few seconds, I wasn't a washed-up, sleep-deprived farmer staring down nightmares. I was just little Davy again, enjoying the touch of the woman I used to think walked on water. I'd had a crush on Janie McBride when I was 13, the kind that burned in your gut and kept you up at night. She was older, beautiful in a strong, earthy way, and she treated me like I mattered. Back then, she'd ruffle my hair and call me trouble, and I'd go red in the face and pretend I hated it. Now, 20 years later, her touch still scrambled something in me. I hadn't realized how empty I'd felt until that hug filled something back in. When she pulled away, I almost leaned forward without meaning to, but she was already back to business, hands on her hips, giving me the kind of once-over only someone who knew you as a kid could get away with. "You look like hell, sweetheart. You eating? You sleeping?" I managed a tired laugh and shook my head. "You know me, always thriving." She pulled back, hands on her hips, giving me the kind of once-over only someone who knew you as a kid could get away with. "Didn't think I'd see you back here so soon. Or ever, really. Thought you were too big for us small-town folk. Didn't plan on it," I muttered, trying not to look like I'd been shaken all night. "You got any 12-gauge slugs?" Her smile faltered just a bit. "Sold out. Been like that a couple of weeks now. Folks have been buying it up like candy." That caught my attention. My stomach tensed like it knew something I didn't. "Why?" I asked, suddenly more alert than I wanted her to see. I tried to play it casual, but the truth was, I was desperate to hear anything that made last night make sense. She tilted her head, studying me for a beat longer than was comfortable. Then she leaned in slightly and lowered her voice. Don't know what's going on up in these hills, but people have been seeing things, hearing things too. My cousin swears something killed 2 of his goats a couple of nights ago, tore the fence out like it was made of cardboard, then tore the goats apart, made a big mess, from what I heard. Guy's half blind, but still, something's up. I nodded slowly, not sure what to say. A beat passed between us. What are you dealing with, David? I hesitated. Lost all my chickens last night. Coop's a wreck. Something big did it. Wrecked the chicken coop and killed every single bird. The place looks like a slaughterhouse. I saw it, briefly. Looked like a man, to be honest. Walked off into the woods in the middle of the night. Can't make sense of it. She straightened up and walked toward the back. Well, maybe you can trap the bastard. You know, teach him a lesson. Come here. We went into the supply section. She pulled a dusty box from a bottom shelf and popped it open to reveal 4 bear traps. Rusted but solid, the kind with heavy iron jaws that would hurt like hell when they closed around someone's leg. Not lethal, but definitely enough to hold someone long enough for the sheriff to arrive and put them out of commission for a while. I didn't really want to use them. Felt wrong. These things were cruel, no matter who or what stepped into them. But I didn't have many options. If I did nothing, more of my animals would die. Back at the farm, I set the traps around the pig stall. I figured that was where he'd go next. Nothing was left in the chicken coop, and the pigs were defenseless and penned in a tight space, easy targets. The layout of the pig stall made it easy. I set the traps under a thin cover of hay, close to the 2 doors on either end. No other way in. I left the cows in the pasture. The barn was too packed with junk to move them in, not without an all-day effort and some heavy equipment. I'd just have to stay awake and head out if something came after the cows instead. That night, I stayed up late, boots on, shotgun loaded. I sat at the kitchen table and stared out the window, checking the tree line every few minutes. But my nerves wouldn't sit still. I kept reaching for my phone, searching keywords like unexplained livestock attacks, upright creature sightings, werewolf in Idaho. What came up was mostly garbage, grainy videos, message board threads filled with half-baked theories, blurry photos of bears on their hind legs. Still, I clicked through them, one after the other. Ended up watching Bigfoot documentaries on YouTube. Even got desperate enough to watch a werewolf movie or two. Bad CGI, worse acting, but something about the way the creatures moved, the way they stalked the edges of the screen, made my skin crawl. I couldn't shake the idea that someone somewhere had seen something real once and dressed it up for Hollywood because no one would believe the truth. I kept glancing between the phone and the window, and every creak of the old house made me flinch. Around midnight, the pigs started getting restless, snorting and stomping around like something had them spooked. At first I didn't move. I just listened. The wind was dead still. No owls, no coyotes, just the pigs. Then it happened. An eruption of noise so sudden and violent I nearly dropped the shotgun. Squeals, crashing wood, a loud metallic snap, followed by a sound that turned my blood cold. A scream unlike anything I'd ever heard. It was high-pitched, but layered, like the shriek of a wounded animal tangled with the gargle of someone choking on blood. Wet and raw, it started as a rising wail and then cracked midway, as if its throat tore from the effort. It didn't sound natural. It didn't even sound alive. It clawed at my spine and rang in my ears long after it stopped. I shot up, grabbed my shotgun, and rushed out the door, but not at a sprint. I slowed just past the threshold, heart pounding, every sense tuned like a snare drum. Sweat was already on my forehead, despite the freezing air, trickling down into my eyebrows. Each step toward the pig stall felt like it took twice as long as it should have. My boots crunched through frost-hardened dirt. I kept the shotgun raised, stock tight to my shoulder, finger just outside the trigger guard. I swept the light slowly from one corner to the next, checking every fence post, every shadow. The pigs had gone dead silent now, like they knew the danger had passed, or wasn't done yet. The only sound left was my own breathing, shallow and quick, and the occasional snap of something settling in the cold. One of the traps was sprung. Its jaws were twisted, bent in a way that metal shouldn't bend. Not without tools, not without intent. Blood smeared the teeth and pooled in the dirt, still dark and wet under my flashlight beam. Thick clumps of black fur were caught in the hinge, matted and coarse. But it was the footprints that stopped me cold. They were deep, sunken into the earth, as if the thing had real weight to it. 5 toes, long and spread wide, each tipped with a claw that had torn into the frozen mud like a chisel. But the proportions were wrong. The angle of the heel, the spacing of the stride, the depth, it didn't line up with any animal I knew, and it sure as hell wasn't a man. Men don't have claws like that. That was the moment I stopped pretending it might have been human. I followed the prints a few feet until they reached the edge of the fence line, where they simply stopped. No scuff marks, no climb, no drag, just gone. Like whatever made them had launched itself over the fence in a single bound and vanished into the woods beyond. I turned back toward the pig stall. A few feet away from the trap, off to the side, I found the piglet, sprawled awkwardly, neck snapped and twisted at an unnatural angle. Deep gouges tore through its side, not clean like a knife, but jagged and uneven, like claws had raked through it. Its legs were curled inward as if it had been flailing when it landed. It didn't look like it had been attacked on the ground. It looked like it had been lifted, snatched, and then dropped mid-flight when the creature stepped into the trap. The violence of it hit me in the gut. Then I decided to take a look inside. The hinges creaked faintly as I pushed the door open with my boot. After what I saw yesterday, I expected the worst, but I was wrong. The pigs were huddled in the far corners of their pens, packed together so tightly their flanks trembled with each breath. Normally, they grunted or shuffled around when I came in. Tonight, not one of them made a sound, just wide eyes glinting in the beam of the light. I counted them, checked for movement and injuries. But aside from the one piglet I'd found outside, the rest looked okay. No blood, no bodies, just terrified animals that knew better than I did what had come through here. It was a stark contrast to the night before. It seems that the thing had learned that killing everything wouldn't do it any good. Taking one pig at a time would be a much more sustainable approach. I reset the damaged trap with stiff fingers. Then I went back inside. Didn't sleep, didn't bother trying. In the morning, I patched up the door. My hands moved on their own, hammering new slats into the frame, replacing hinges, sealing gaps. But my mind was somewhere else entirely. I kept thinking about the piglet's broken body and could barely tear my eyes away from those clawed prints leading away from it. It was a bright morning, too bright for what had happened just hours earlier. That was the worst part, how normal it looked in the daylight, like the night hadn't happened at all. Once the repairs were done, I stood back and looked at the other entrance to the stall. The smaller gate I rarely used. I stared at it for a long moment before deciding I might as well reinforce that one too. The thing wasn't dumb. If it came back, it would try the path of least resistance. So I double-latched it, added a crossbeam, and even screwed in an old steel plate I'd found behind the barn. Then I walked the perimeter, double-checking each trap. I left them in place. No more hesitation. If it came back, it was going to bleed for it. Later that day, I drove back into Bonner's Ferry. I hadn't planned to, but something in me needed to see another human face. More than that, I needed to know if Janie had restocked her ammo shelf. Sleep still hadn't come, and my thoughts were running ragged. If I was going to face whatever was prowling my land, I needed more than rusty bear traps and buckshot. Janie was at the counter again, unpacking a box of canned goods. She looked up as the bell above the door jingled, and her face softened. "Back already, little Davy? You look worse than yesterday." "Didn't think that was possible," I muttered. I stepped up to the counter and gave her a hopeful look. "You get that shipment of slugs in yet?" She shook her head slowly. "Still nothing. The distributor's been dry for weeks. Everyone around here's buying it up like we're going to war. Some of them probably think we are." I sighed and rubbed my forehead. She must have seen the exhaustion in my eyes because she stepped around the counter and placed a hand on my arm. "You all right?" I hesitated. "Something tried to get into the pig stall last night. Set off a trap, Killed one of the piglets. Left fur and blood all over the place. Prints were wrong. Not human. Not animal. She frowned deeply. Jesus, David. I don't know what to do, I said, quieter than I meant to. I don't scare easily. But this thing, whatever it is, I can't explain it. And I haven't slept more than a couple of hours in the last 2 days. Janie's expression softened again, but there was a flicker of worry behind her eyes now. She didn't say I was imagining things, didn't offer any easy explanation. She just looked at me, serious. I wish I had something to offer you. But I'm out of traps, too, after what I sold you. You're not the only one seeing shadows out there, Davy. I nodded, jaw tight. Just figured I'd check. Didn't want to be caught with nothing if it comes back. I lingered a moment longer than I needed to, part of me not wanting to go back out to face that thing again. But the other part knew I had no choice. I had gone all in on the farm. If I didn't find a solution for this problem, I'd find myself sleeping under a bridge soon. That night, just after 9, I heard a knock at the front door. Not loud, not frantic, just a casual tap-tap that felt out of place with everything else happening lately. I cracked the door open, shotgun in one hand, and found Janie standing there with a canvas bag and a crooked smile. "Brought you dinner," she said. "And backup." My face lit up instantly, and I let her in. We cooked steaks and cracked open the bottle of bourbon she'd brought. For a while, the tension faded. We sat on the couch, sipping slowly, the glow of the fire licking at the walls. She pressed close as we talked, laughed at one of my jokes. Her hand rested on my leg longer than it needed to. She hadn't said it, but I knew why she was here. She genuinely cared about me. "You're still handsome when you're stressed," she said, tracing the rim of her glass. "But you could use a nap." I blushed. "You offering to babysit me again?" "Maybe. You used to fall asleep on my lap during thunderstorms, remember?" "Yeah. Think I was 5 at the time." She leaned in close. Her head was resting on my shoulder. I allowed myself to relax a bit, when suddenly, the cows started bellowing out in the paddock. We both froze. The sound came from the west pasture. Low, guttural calls, panicked and rising in waves. I stood up fast. Janie was right behind me. I grabbed the flashlight and the shotgun from beside the door. She didn't ask, just followed me outside into the cold. Moonlight spilled across the field in sheets of silver and gray. The cows had formed a defensive circle, their bodies pressed tightly together, heads low and facing outward, with their calves hidden in the center. They were clearly terrified, but they weren't running. They were standing their ground. Just beyond them, between the tree line and the far fence, something moved. At first, I thought it was the wind playing tricks, shadows shifting through the mist, a trick of the light. But then I saw it clearly, a tall, dark shape weaving slowly through the open space, keeping its distance from the herd. There was just enough moonlight to outline its shape. It was walking upright. It stayed in motion, fluid and low, pacing around the cows like it was trying to find a weak spot. It moved with a predator's patience, circling, watching, planning. Janie sucked in a sharp breath beside me, her hand tightening on my arm. The cows held formation. Whatever intelligence they had was working full tilt. Protect the calves. Don't run. Keep the threat in sight. The creature paced another quarter turn, and then it stopped. Its head turned, not toward the herd, but toward the next paddock over. It was smart enough to know that taking on 24 cows wasn't a smart move, and that's when I realized what it had decided. The adjacent paddock was empty, except for one animal, my Hereford bull. It stood alone, head lowered, nostrils flaring. The creature moved quickly, leaping the fence with ease. The bull charged. They collided with a sound like trees breaking, horns slamming into ribs, hooves scraping earth, claws slashing fur. "Go!" I shouted, and we ran. The two of them were a blur of motion in the moonlight, crashing together and tumbling apart. The bull was massive, probably 4 or 5 times the weight of the creature. An old Hereford stud bred for size and power, and he had a temper, as I had learned the hard way on my first day back at the farm. The bull didn't hesitate or show any signs of fear. When they slammed together, its horns caught the beast square in the ribs, lifting it clean off the ground and sending it skidding several yards across the pasture. Dirt and grass flew with the impact, and the creature landed hard, its claws digging into the soil to keep from rolling. It snarled, a high and wet sound, then lunged again, but the bull was already charging, knocking it down again and again. Janie raised the flashlight as we approached, trying to keep the beam on them. I raised the shotgun, but couldn't get a clean shot. Every time I lined up, the bull surged forward again, barreling into the creature and blocking my view. At least the bull was holding his own for the time being, but the beast didn't give up easily. The creature was learning. It ducked under a charge and tried to slash across the bull's flank. Each time the bull lunged, it shifted a little faster, a little more precisely. It began anticipating the animal's rhythm, sidestepping just before impact, striking low with sweeping claws, one pass, then another. The creature got lucky, ducking past the horns in a low, fluid motion and raking its claws deep into the bull's side. Flesh split open in 4 jagged lines from shoulder to belly. The bull moaned, a deep guttural sound of pain, but it didn't go down. Instead, it snorted, turned hard, and charged again. Even wounded, it still fought with fury, trying to finish the creature with its horns, before the pain overtook its strength. But the creature had changed tactics. It no longer tried to meet the bull head-on. When the next charge came, it didn't dodge and slash. Instead, it grabbed one of the bull's horns with its clawed hand as it surged past. The muscles in its arm flexed as it used the leverage to pull itself upward in a heartbeat, claws scraping against hide. Before the bull could react, the thing had hauled itself up on its back. The bull thrashed wildly, kicking and spinning in every direction, but the creature held fast, clamped tight like a burr in a wound. Its claws dug deeper for purchase as the bull's hooves tore up great divots in the pasture. The creature wasted no time. Its head snapped down, jaws open, and it sank its teeth into the thick muscle at the base of the bull's neck. The sound was sickening, a wet crunch, followed by a deep bellow of pain that rolled across the field like thunder. I raised the shotgun, heart hammering, sweat burning in my eyes. The 2 animals were locked so tight, rolling and jerking, that I couldn't find a clean shot. I kept aiming, tracking them, waiting for some window, anything, but the movement never stopped. Fur and horn, blood and dirt, it all blurred together. Desperation crept in, hot and rising. The bull was hurt, and I knew he wouldn't last much longer. If I waited any longer, I was going to lose it for sure. If I fired and hit the bull, it would hurt it, but not badly enough to put it down. So I pulled the trigger, hoping for the best. The first shot went wide, hitting nothing but air. They moved too fast, twisting through the blast pattern like a whirlwind of flesh and fury. I fired the second barrel. This time the buckshot struck home. The creature jerked violently as the pellets slammed into its side, and it was thrown sideways off the bull's back. For a second, I thought I'd knocked it off completely, but it didn't fall. One clawed hand was still hooked deep into the bull's hide, its grip unbreakable. It swung low and clung to the far side of the bull, now half hidden behind the animal's massive body. I cursed and fumbled to reload, my fingers clumsy with adrenaline. A shell slipped through my grip and dropped into the grass, just as the creature shifted position. One clawed hand was buried deep into the bull's shoulder, while the other reached under its throat, finding purchase on the soft flesh on the other side. The creature pulled itself close and up from beneath, and with a sudden, brutal snap of its head, sank its teeth into the bull's exposed throat. The jaws closed with a sickening crunch of cartilage and windpipe. The bull was off balance, bleeding, and still trying to twist its head to catch the thing with its horns, but it was too late. It dropped to its knees and let out a strangled, choking groan and staggered, legs trembling beneath its bulk. The bull gave one last, shuddering bellow, and then it collapsed, taking the monster down with it into the dirt. I was still fumbling with the second round, a new one I had pulled from my pocket. barely able to tear my eyes away from the carnage in front of me. The bull lay motionless, massive chest heaving, while the creature began to move underneath the mountain of flesh. With visible effort, it pulled itself out from under the bull's fallen weight, slithering free like a thing born of nightmares. Its dark fur was slick with blood, some of it the bull's, some possibly its own. Then it climbed on top of the bull's back, rising slowly with eerie grace until it stood tall on two legs, feet planted wide, ready for a fight. It locked eyes with us, those burning, reflective eyes fixed and unblinking. The flashlight hit it square, that fur, that build, and now we saw all the details, the long muzzle glistening with blood, clawed hands, not paws, hands. Then it opened its jaws and let out a deep, threatening growl that vibrated through my ribs. I froze. For just a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't think. I was looking at an abomination, a real flesh and blood werewolf, towering in the moonlight like something that should only exist in movies or campfire stories. But it was here, and it was staring right at us. Janie gasped. "Oh my God!" Her voice cracked mid-sentence, half-whispered, like her mind hadn't caught up with what her eyes were seeing. She took a shaky step back, hand clutching my arm so tightly her knuckles went white. "That's not a bear. David, what the hell is that thing?" Her eyes stayed locked on the creature, wide and disbelieving, as if saying it out loud would make it any less monstrous. Finally, I snapped out of it, shoved the shell into the breech, and snapped the barrel shut with a shaky hand, raising the old shotgun again. The creature was still standing atop the bull. It hadn't moved. It was still staring right at us, ready to lunge. I squeezed both triggers. The blast hit it square in the chest. The buckshot tore into its flesh, opening wide gashes and sending a spray of blood and fur into the air. The impact threw the thing off its feet. It stumbled backwards, then crashed into the dirt behind the bull with a dull, wet thud. It hit the ground hard, but it didn't stay down. Before I could even reach for my pocket to reload, its limbs scrambled for purchase like a spider flipped on its back. It yelped and let out the same high-pitched, layered screams I'd heard the previous night at the pig stall. My hands fumbled with the shells, breath catching in my throat. By the time I raised the shotgun again, the creature was already moving, bolting into the dark at full speed, dropping to all fours as it crossed the field in great lunging strides. I brought up the shotgun, desperate to drop it before it got away again, but it was too late. The creature was too fast. It would have been a waste. Seconds later, it vanished into the woods. Janie and I stood there frozen for a second, the air still buzzing from the echo of the blast. Then, slowly, cautiously, we advanced toward the bull's body. I kept the shotgun raised, scanning the tree line with every step. My nerves were frayed to hell, and I half expected those two yellow dots to reappear at the edge of the forest. Janie moved beside me, silent, her flashlight sweeping the trees. The bull was still breathing, but just barely. He was on his side, legs twitching now and then, eyes wide with pain. Blood pooled beneath his throat and along his rib cage, thick and steaming in the cold. His flanks rose and fell in short, ragged bursts. I knelt down beside him, laying a hand on his shoulder, trying to keep my own panic in check. He didn't flinch under my touch. He didn't have the strength left to. "Davy," Janie whispered, crouching beside me. "Jesus, he's still alive." "Yeah," I muttered, eyes still scanning the shadows. "But not for long if we don't do something." I kept the shotgun raised across my knees, fingers tight on the grip, listening to the wind and the bull's rattling breath. I wasn't prepared to give up on him yet. Moral considerations aside, he was the only real asset I had on the farm. If I shot him now, I'd be finished too. So I told Janie to call the vet. She made the call while I stayed with him. Half an hour later, a battered Ford pickup came rolling up the driveway and parked beside the gate. Dr. Leary stepped out, a lean, no-nonsense woman in her 50s with a cigarette tucked behind one ear and a flashlight already in hand. She didn't ask many questions, just took one look at the bull, clicked her tongue, and got to work. The wounds were bad, but the bleeding had slowed. He'd lost a lot of blood, but the creature's bite had somehow missed the jugular. Dr. Leary gave him a heavy sedative and set about flushing the gashes and packing them with antibiotics. Janie held the flashlight while the vet worked, while I held on to the shotgun. Dr. Leary glanced at the wounds as she worked, her brow furrowed deeper with every new gash she uncovered. I've patched up animals after bear maulings, cougar attacks, even a freak accident with a rototiller, she muttered, voice low and tight. But this? She paused, pulling back slightly to inspect one particularly deep gouge along the bull's side. These tears are off, and the spacing on these claws. Hell, I don't know what to make of it. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. You're not the only one with weird wounds showing up, by the way. I treated a horse up near Moy Springs last week. Same kind of slashes, same kind of story. Something spooked the whole herd, and the owner fired a few shots at it. Swears it wasn't a cougar. Thing got away and never came back. By the time the bull was stabilized and breathing more steadily, the sky was starting to pale on the horizon. It would be a long road to recovery, but he'd live. Janie practically moved in the next day. She didn't ask, and I didn't argue. She brought over 2 big Rottweilers named Buck and Daisy, dogs with enough muscle and bark to make any sane predator think twice. I knew they might not be able to bring the werewolf down on their own, but that wasn't the point. They'd hear it. They'd sound the alarm. That was enough for now. We spent the better part of the next 2 days cleaning out the barn, tossed out old, rusted gear, tarps full of mold, and old dead machinery, cleared enough space to move the cattle inside at night. We reinforced the barn doors with steel bars and lumber, drilled braces into the concrete footings, and ran an extension cord from the house to set up motion sensor lights. It wasn't pretty, but it felt a bit more secure. We even hung wind chimes made from scrap metal near the doors of the barn, the pig stall, and all around the house just in case the dogs didn't smell or hear the creature in time. The bull, still weak but alive, was relocated to the pig stall. We set up a separate enclosure in one of the back corners with thick wooden walls and stacked hay bales for insulation. The space was tighter, but it was safer, and the stall was easier to monitor from the house. Janie cooked for me after work and brought a boatload of bear traps and 12-gauge slugs when they finally hit her shop, refusing to let me pay a dime for them. I worked the fences and stayed busy in the fields, but every evening we'd sit on the porch, drink coffee or whiskey, and watch the tree line. We kept waiting for another attack, but it never came. Instead, we started hearing things, rumors from further north, closer to the Canadian border. People talking about large tracks in the mud, or strange howls at night. Something is mutilating cattle, even breaking into farmhouses. Whatever it was, a dogman, a werewolf, had moved on. One night, Janie and I were sitting on the porch in silence, the dogs asleep at our feet. She nudged my arm and said, "You know we're basically a couple now, right?" I looked at her and smirked. Then I reached over and took her hand. Things were definitely a lot easier with her being around. It wasn't exactly peace, but it was something close. The farm still needed work. The fences still sagged in places. The roof still leaked, and the woods still felt like they were watching. But for now, things were quiet, and with the bull recovering, I still had a chance to make this work.